I was learning how to listen. I was healing deeper pieces, deeper pain within me. But then I also began to share. And this was really important. This is an important piece for my journey, not because it was also very healing to let it out, tell my story, but also because women began to connect with me and say, hey, I'm going through this too. You're helping me not feel so alone. What I didn't realize was happening was I was beginning to build a really trusting community.
Hello and welcome to the Shift Your Day Job podcast. I'm Brittany Cates, your host and companion on this incredible journey of career transformation. Get ready for inspiring stories, valuable insights, and a roadmap to shift your mindset towards a more fulfilling professional life. In each episode, we explore the remarkable journeys of individuals who made the leap from one career to another. As we navigate through these stories together, you'll find motivation, strategies, and the confidence to pursue your dreams. Whether you're feeling stuck, contemplating a change, or just seeking a dose of inspiration, this podcast is your weekly companion. Tune in every Thursday as we uncover the secrets to shifting your day job. I'm Brittany Cates, and I'm here to guide you on your path to a more fulfilling career. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Shift Your Day Job podcast. My name is Brittany Cates. I'm your host, and I'm so grateful that you're here today. On today's episode, I am excited to introduce you to Christina Beatty. I found her on Instagram. I don't remember exactly how, probably just scrolling. And I saw her sharing a message about how she has gone through a journey of rediscovering herself and learning how to better trust herself. And part of that journey was moving from being a high school teacher to owning her own entrepreneurial business. And she works in the realm of spirituality and helping people find their purpose in life. And I just love how genuine she is and that her message that she shares with the world is a really positive and hopeful message. And so I wanted to bring her on the podcast to share her career journey and to talk about some of the things that she has done to completely change her life in such a way that she feels more fulfilled and more aligned with her true self. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Please welcome Christina to the podcast. So thanks for being willing to be on the podcast. It's nice to meet you in person. I see you live.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy what you do. So I appreciate your willingness.
Yeah. I'm excited to be here. Like any chance that I get to share my journey is so important. Not because I get off telling my journey. It's more so helping anyone who's listening, one, know that they're not alone. And two, that there's so much power that can be found when we really embrace the hard stuff. When that's where we find our power.
Yeah. And I love the messages that you share about the changes that you've made on your Instagram as well. So yeah, I'm just really impressed by you. So I started following you and here we are. Oh,
Yay.
super cool how that happens, right?
Yeah.
Especially in this day and age with all the technology and how we meet people.
Yeah. Yeah. I was excited when you reached out. I'm like, okay, let's do this.
Have you been on many podcasts?
Mm.
Or do you have your own podcast?
Yeah, it's funny. I have done interviews here and there. I also used to have a podcast with one of my close girlfriends. We did it for about a year and it was really amazing. We would share, both of us were very much in our healing journeys. I don't think that ever really ends. We're always going deeper into things. But at that time in my life, her and I worked together to really create content, podcast episodes around healing, tapping into your spiritual connection, motherhood. And yeah, it was really cool to build a community and express myself in that way. It has since we've stopped, but it is something that's always been in the back of my mind is getting back into that because I do love using my voice in that way.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And especially with me starting my podcast journey, you don't really know where it's going to take you. And whatever it does end up being great. So for that year, you guys had that outlet, and for whatever reason it stopped, but that's okay. Like, that's just what it was meant to be at that time. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Being open to the process. That's a hard one sometimes, but
yeah, for sure. For sure.
yeah.
Great. Let's start off with you sharing your journey about your career change and the mindset shift that it took to get you where you are today. So, what did that look like?
Yeah. So it's funny. Anyone who knows me now is like, you are not who you used to be. It's a complete 180. And before I began doing what I'm doing now, I was a high school teacher. I taught high school psychology, social studies, and English. And I did that for 13 years. I loved it. I loved the relationship with the kids. And teaching is a very natural thing for me. Like, I'm really in my element when it comes to teaching. And so that part was very fulfilling. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, I was a newer mom. My kids were both under the age of 2. And I really began to hit a rock bottom with my mental health. Everything was crumbling. I had found control in doing things a certain way and setting up my life a certain way, and all of that was no longer working. And I was really forced to go inwards and figure out what was going on because I was in so much pain, internal emotional pain and suffering and postpartum depression and anxiety. And it was just very dark. And in the process of going within, I really had to learn how to surrender control, which was very hard. But in that, I began to build this spiritual connection that I had never had within myself prior to that. And that I have this very vivid memory one day in my rock bottom where I was laying on my bedroom floor and I was in just such a dark, scary place. And I said out loud to who knows what at that point, saying, I need help. If there's anything out there, I need help. And that was a really pivotal point on my journey because I had never actually asked for help before. And what began to happen was I started listening more closely to what was going on within myself, of the things I really needed to be doing, of the healing I needed to be doing, of the pain. And as I began to do that, things really began to unfold. I was building a spiritual connection. I was learning how to listen to my intuition. I was being shown all of these different outlets to find healing. And I began to share my journey. And that was also a big piece because when I was going through it, no one was really talking about it. And I felt like that was really missing. There were a few really big pieces that were occurring during this time. One, I was learning how to listen. I was healing deeper pieces, deeper pain within me. But then I also began to share. And this was really important. This is an important piece for my journey, not because it was also very healing to let it out, tell my story, but also because women began to connect with me and say, hey, I'm going through this too. You're helping me not feel so alone because, yeah, we're human. We're all going through stuff, right? And in that process, so talk about trusting the process, what I didn't realize was happening was I was beginning to build a really trusting community. You know, over the course of the years, that's been a really big piece in what I do is this trust, and that everything that I do with clients and in my new path has to do with everything I've first done on my own journey. And so what began to happen was it got to a point where I had been working, I'd shifted down to part-time with teaching. And I was still doing all the mothering stuff. But then I was beginning to build this other piece, what was my business. I made the decision to go back to school to become a life coach because I really liked what I was doing with women, but there just wasn't really like a structure around it. So I was like, oh, I'll go back and do a program and start doing that. And that's where everything really began to build, because once I finished the program, I had built a foundation, and it wasn't very long until I had to make the decision to be able to put all my energy into my business instead of teaching. That was one of the hardest decisions.
Yeah. Can you talk about maybe some of the challenges that arose from that, and like what like you were feeling and thinking at that time? Because I know a lot of people experience that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what happens too when we do any type of career change, there is a lot of identity shifting that is occurring. And that not only is that scary in terms of our relationships with others, but also in ourselves. Like all of a sudden, we're not who we thought we were. We, things are just, it's a collapse of the system. And so that was a big piece, was, learning how to transition from what was one identity into, who I've become now. Another really hard piece at that time was in my marriage at the time. Financially, being a teacher, it's a very safe financial career. You have a pension, you have benefits, you have a salary. And so that shift was also very scary because I was now an entrepreneur and there's no certainty there. And yes, you can make more, but you can also make a lot less. So those were two really big pieces.
And how did you navigate those challenges?
Yeah. So when it came to the identity piece, the work that I was doing within myself really helped create a more trusting foundation. I think fear is part of all of it. Like we're supposed to experience fear. We're human. It's being able to know how to hold the fear and being able to see the beliefs that come up that are often formed from the families we grow up in, community, cultural influences. So like being able to see those deeper beliefs that are going to come to the surface whenever we're shifting in something or expanding. So definitely that inner work was so important because it allowed me to continue to foster this trust within myself to be able to make the hard decisions that kept coming up. And with the shift of being a teacher to an entrepreneur and the money piece, I think the money piece is still something that I continue to work through because, gosh, like conditioning around money and beliefs around money, I think runs so deep for people. It's like generational stuff and societal stuff. It's not like just the family you grew up in. And so I think that continues to be a learning curve for me. But I did find that the more I trusted in myself and did what felt authentically true to me, the more abundance I was actually able to experience because it created less resistance of what wanted to come through. So that was one piece that kind of helped with that.
I love that. That being more authentically yourself, starting to trust yourself, really puts you in a state of flow and allows more receptivity to come into your life because, like you said, you don't have that resistance. You're not pushing against it as much. So I like that reminder.
Yeah, and I will add to that because I've been learning a lot more about this money piece, especially more so lately. The connection we have with our bodies is so important, and especially our awareness of our nervous system. Because if we are in fight or flight or freeze, that naturally is like a resistive force that's pushing things away. Like it's a shutdown. And so learning about my nervous system has been really key in understanding money and abundance better because it's all energy.
Yeah.
So I will say that as well, like for your listeners, learning about your nervous system, that can be so crucial, not just in your own healing and feeling better in your life, but also understanding how our nervous system is a big factor when it comes to abundance and money and being able to hold it.
Yeah. Like recognizing when those automatic responses come up of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and then being able to tune back into your nervous system to start regulating those natural, like automatic responses. Yeah, it's just like saying it feels like a lot, but you're not going to do it all at once. It's
No.
bit by bit, right? Like start noticing, and then as you start noticing, then start, okay, this one time I breathed and I got back into my body. And yeah, it's definitely fascinating because I've been learning a lot more about the nervous system too.
It's been a big piece on my journey. And, it connected to the fears piece. Like if you've got fear coming up, what do you need to do to help yourself feel safe? Fear is a natural part of the process. When we are in fear, it's showing us that there's a threat. And so what do we need to do to create safety in our system? And yeah, there's lots of different ways we can do that. But I think just even having the awareness of when we are feeling that and giving ourselves what we need, so big.
Absolutely. And it's interesting how, I mean, technically, most of the time we are safe, right? It's just all in our mind that's making us feel unsafe. So being able to maybe just look around you at the things in the room and recognize I am safe. I am here right now,
Yeah.
instead of letting your mind take you on this like ride.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just like you said, when fear's showing up, that ego response, we're in our mind. So how do we drop into our body and reconnect to presence and flow and connection and essentially our intuition?
Yeah, definitely a newer exploration for me. And I love learning. And so it's just also fascinating to me.
Yeah, me too. I could geek out on this stuff forever.
Yeah. And then especially when you like start implementing it and you like can see the the proof of it, right? And then it just makes it all that more like, oh, I want to tell, I want to share this. I want to tell other people about this and want other people to start doing this too, because it really is helpful.
So powerful. Yeah.
Okay, so you were a high school teacher. You went through lots of emotional, maybe turmoil and trying to figure out that piece. So where you're an entrepreneur now, tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how, that came about for you.
Yeah. This is the bit of the wild part. I mean, there's been lots of wild parts, but when I say that some people would look at me and be like, you are a completely different person. So what I do for my career now, I mean, there are lots of different things I offer when I do work with clients, but essentially there's a mixture of coaching as well as more of the spiritual component. I offer readings. I also do somatic work with clients. I run workshops and programs, but at the core of what I do, it is bringing you home to your power, bringing you home to your body, helping you strengthen the connection with your intuition and learn how to trust yourself and be your most authentic, bring your most authentic light to this world. And I definitely work up in the spiritual realms, and it's so cool. I love the work that I do. I provide readings in the Akashic Records, as well as intuitive guidance sessions with your spirit team. And then, there's lots of other things, but I say this all because prior to my journey, I was the skeptic in the room. Like I was like, oh, spirits, what? Or like I'd get invited to like a psychic workshop or something. I'd be like, no, that's not for me.
Yeah.
So it's just funny that like that is what I do now. But
Yeah.
one of the big pieces that really changed the path for me was during my awakening. I also say like my breakdown was, when I was going through all of this inner turmoil, my grandpa actually passed away. And I always had a very gentle and tender connection with my grandpa. And after he passed, he started coming through in my dreams and also meditations. And at first I didn't think too much about it, but then he would start to tell me like really specific details to pass on to my dad, who was his son. And I would say these things to my dad, and he'd be like, "How do you know that?" And I'd be like, "Oh, like it's what like I met, like grandpa came through in a dream and he told me this." He's like, "No one knows that." He's like, "I wouldn't even know that because I wasn't even alive when that would have happened." And so there were very interesting synchronistic experiences that I began to have. Another very interesting experience was I was out with girlfriends one time and I was telling them about how my grandpa was connecting with me. And they're like, "Can you connect with other past loved ones?" And I was like, "No." And they're like, "Let's try." And I was like, "Okay." And what occurred over the next couple hours, I connected with one of my girlfriend's uncles who had passed, and he was telling me very specific details that there's no way I could have known. I'd never met him before in my life. She was bawling her eyes out. And then my other girlfriend, her grandma came through and she was telling me all these memories from childhood that she had forgotten about. And so there were these moments that I began to have with spirit that were inexplainable. And it began to shift how I looked at what this experience is. It was a really big awakening for me. And that was truly, and I do believe as well, all of the pain that I was healing within myself, I think, energetically delayering a lot of the ways I was blocked, my channel, because I do believe we all have this ability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we are spiritual beings, so it would make sense that we all have the ability. It's just what has gotten in our way as a human in a body, right?
Yeah.
That is keeping us from being in touch with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was, my journey continued to unfold. And I think it's really important here. Like, I wasn't placing a lot of expectation around what was occurring. I wasn't thinking at that time, I'm going to completely shift and this is just going to be my business. Like, I really was letting things unfold with the idea that my healing was the priority. How I wanted to feel was the priority. And I think we can get really caught up sometimes in that ego of like, this is how it needs to look. And that actually prevents us from experiencing what's supposed to actually happen and occur for our highest alignment.
Yeah. I love that piece of how do I want to feel? Because as a society, like, we are so concerned with how things look or appear on the outside. And rather than, what's the, how do I feel in this? Like, for instance, relationships, like we celebrate the marriage, but we don't know what that feels like for those individuals in that experience. And that's more important than the actual, like, what does it look like on the outside? And so I love that reminder of, if I am struggling in a career right now, or just in a space in my personal life where I'm not feeling the way that I want to feel, that I know I should feel because it's what I want, then how do I want to feel? And starting to take those actions to get there, but also, like you said, like letting go and letting it just be a process and not focusing on the outcome or the how all the time. Just going through emotions. Yeah, that's the hardest part, because we want to like control everything.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, this piece of like, how do you want to feel? That's actually such a important part of the process that I do with clients when I'm helping them get clear on anything that they desire for themselves. It's actually, so I run a coaching program on helping you tap into your power and your purpose. It's actually one of the first things we do is, okay, here's this thing that you want, but how would that feel? And often the women will say, whoa, I've never asked myself this. And even in just that, like when we ask ourselves how we want to feel, there is so much self-validation in that. And that's where we begin to build the trust. And often we won't, like, depending on what we've been through in our lives, we're not asked a lot, how do we want to feel? You kind of just get thrown into the system, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And trusting that, like, most of the time, I'm imagining like a skeptic, right? Being like, how do I want to feel? Like, I shouldn't be focusing on that. But I believe that most people are genuinely good, and therefore what they want to feel are going to be good, positive things that like make their life better, not selfish, like egotistical, like feelings, right? And
Yeah.
so it comes back to that trusting yourself and trusting that you know what's best for you and that you have that intuition.
Yeah. And the more, and so if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I can't sit and do how I want to feel, that won't get me anywhere. Well, the kicker is that actually the more you check in with how you want to feel and you learn how to tap into that energy more frequently, that is how you begin to experience more of what you want, because it's an energy.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
It's like, this is the coolest stuff ever.
Yeah. I heard someone recently saying, is it our nervous system that is like electricity? Like there's electricity in our body or something like that. And there's a picture of the nervous system and just like how the energy flows through it. I don't know. I was like, huh, I never actually like thought of it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I haven't actually heard that before, but what it does make me think about is when we begin to do more of the things that allow us to feel the way we want to feel, which often is deeper feelings of like fulfillment, joy, love, connection, presence. When we begin to do more of that, we start to tap more into our life force energy. And that's what makes me think of that lightning. Because when we're tapped in, oof, that's like, there's the fire. Like there's that, it's like this, it has no bounds. You can get like lost in it. It's like this fire in you that starts to come out.
Yeah.
And that's when things get really magical.
Yeah. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about this, but is there anything else you might want to add about a tough moment in your transition and how you stayed resilient through that challenge?
Mm. One of the most important tools that I have brought into my life is called parts work. And Richard Schwartz created the internal family systems model. I highly recommend anybody who's listening to this. It's such a game changer. And I have had, it's funny, like I had my original big, massive rock bottom. But since then, I've also still had these experiences where it's collapsed some things, right? And it has felt like the rock bottom energy, just not as pronounced. And since parts work has come into my life and I've had those experiences, it has allowed me to be able to hold so much more. It's allowed me to find that resilience. More recently, so I actually had to go on antidepressants for a couple years. And that was a really important piece of my journey. You know, medication can get a bad flack. It can get a bad name. I think that there's a time and a place, although it doesn't need to be a crutch. And I really did have to go on it for a couple of years to heal some deeper trauma within myself. And at the beginning of this year, I felt that I was ready to get off of it. And parts work has allowed me, along with my somatic connection, the somatic work that I've done, it has allowed me to really embody that resilience in being able to hold so much more the medication helped provide this baseline for me to heal deeper pieces. And then as I came off the medication, things start showing up. Things become a lot more intense again. And parts work and my somatic connection has really helped me find resilience in the experiencing of it all again. So,
And can you explain a little bit what is somatic work for the
yeah,
audience? 'Cause
yeah,
I remember when that was a new word for me. So
yeah. So the way I like to talk about somatic work, and this is actually something that I do with clients because it's something I have learned along the way. I really just view it as coming home to the body, being able to be in your body and experience anything and all of what is showing up and being able to stay grounded. And it doesn't mean that we don't get dysregulated. It's actually helping ourselves find regulation through the dysregulation. And when we have this connection within our body, when we have these practices and these tools, parts work being sort of a branch of this, we can learn how to hold so much more in our experience because our body stores so much. And what I have learned along the way is that we can do all the work up in our mind to do, the talk therapy. Like it's great, but it's just, I think, a beginning piece for actually getting into the body and moving that energy, creating safety and regulation and moving that energy.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Can you talk about your support system
Mm.
through your career transition and through all of these changes that you've gone through and what that looked like on your journey?
Yeah. So, and I would be curious to see how many of your listeners would agree with this, but I was hyper independent my whole life. I did everything on my own. I don't need help. I got it, which is obviously a response to things I've been through. But learning how to accept support in my life has been a game changer. But I've also had to learn how to open myself up to safe connection to accept that, not just accepting it from anyone, but those safe connections. So I've got some key girlfriends, I've got my sisters, and also finding practitioners that you really align with. And that's changed for me over the years, but I still have some solid ones that I continue to connect with. I think sometimes we can think, oh, I don't have the money to afford that, but it's truly an investment in your health as well as what you desire, because you need to have those people that can be a mirror to show you what we can't always see within ourselves. And so, yeah, it's taken me a long time to really open up to that, but it has made such a difference on my journey. Like, we're not supposed to do it alone.
Yeah. Like when it comes to career transitions or job searching, there's the word networking, right? That I know for me was kind of intimidating. But if we really take a step back and what is networking, right? It's building a community, it's
Yeah.
building relationships, it's finding support and then supporting others at the same time, right? Because it's not just a take experience, it's a give and take experience. So
Yeah. Yeah. I actually, about a month ago, I went to a really special retreat, and there was a lot of vulnerability, the opportunity to be very vulnerable and intimate in that setting with others, probably the most I've ever been. And I think it's important to note that when we do open ourselves up, especially if it's hard to be vulnerable, one, while it is very healing and we will notice an impact after, what you might also notice is your self-close, because there will be parts that come up saying, oh, that wasn't safe. It's like the identity collapse of like who we've always been. And so I think too, for anyone listening, if the idea of community and networking and trusting people feels scary, it's recognizing that that is a part of you that's showing up that feels scared. It's not all of you. And what does that part need to feel safe? Because it's connecting is why we're here. It's such a key piece.
yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for that reminder.
Mhm.
Yeah. What is it about it that feels scary, or where's the fear coming from? And then being able to sit with it and like figure it out. Like we don't want to, but it's so valuable because on the other side of it is going to be more expansion and more community, right? More people in your corner helping you
Yes.
along the way.
Yeah.
Can you offer some practical tips or resources, maybe some more specific ones to our readers to help them with shifting their mindset when it comes to making a new career change, trying to figure out what's next for them, etc.?
Mhm. So one really big piece that's helped me on my journey is understanding the difference between what is your ego and your fears, as well as the difference between what is your intuition and what you deeply desire. Maybe for anyone listening who thinks like on a soul level or a deeper intuitive level. And a way that you can start to discern this is paying attention to how each of those feel. So with your fears and your ego, keeping in mind that our ego is always, and it's not like the ego of like cocky or overconfident. It's like, no, it's this almost part of us within our system that attempts to keep us safe in what we've always known and who we've always been, because there's certainty there. And so it's starting to bring awareness to when your ego and your fears show up. How does that feel for you? And often your fears are going to carry an energy of maybe a more frantic energy. You might feel more heady, up in your mind, rumination, bit chaotic, ungrounded, disconnected, right? So there'll be an energy to your fears. And then when it comes to your intuition, noticing how that feels for you. And often something that is right for us on a deeper level, there will be like you might feel it deeper in your body. It might feel more grounded, more centered, sturdier, more connected. It might also even show up in a really quiet way because our intuition often whispers and our fear often screams.
Right.
And so, just building awareness of how those two present, so key.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good way to understand, okay, what does that mean to pay attention, right? Like, well, what am I paying attention to?
Yes.
So those are some good examples to help people
Yeah.
recognize what they're paying attention to. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think just remembering that again, something we discussed was whenever you're expanding into something that's probably really good for you, there will be so much fear because that's nothing you've ever done before.
Yeah.
And there isn't familiarity there. There isn't safety, so to speak. And so that's okay. It's like kind of accepting that that's part of the process.
Right. Like if you have a goal in mind and you know that's what you're shooting for, and yet the fear is happening along the way, are you going to let that fear stop you from achieving that goal? Or are you going to find a way to move through that fear so you can keep going? Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's about being okay with that being part of the process and being okay with feeling the feeling,
Yeah. Yeah.
right, along the way.
Yeah. And
It's
I
so
always
funny.
like to compare it to like if you have a child that's like really scared to do something, you wouldn't just drag the child I mean, I hope you wouldn't just drag the child by the hand and force them. The best way that you would work with that child is sitting down, seeing what feels really scary, supporting them in that, but then still gently nudging them forward in what is good for them.
Mm.
And that's how we have to support ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that reminder. It comes back to like inner child work, but also just being able to see ourselves and love ourselves as much as we love our kids and seeing that potential. That's I don't know. I have a nephew and it's just been so like my perspective on things has shifted because he's now in my life and I like love him so much, And then I imagine like that with other people, or other children, whatever. So yeah, I love that reminder of like, we are all just little children, and how can you nurture and help and come from a heart center, right? So
and I love that you get to experience that with your nephew, because I think that we forget that when these parts show up and they're scared, that is a younger part of you. And it has a reason to feel scared, and we don't always have to go back and figure out why and spend so much time in that reason. But it's just recognizing that there is a younger part of you that's scared right now, and it needs support, and it needs to feel safe.
Right. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
really what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that example.
Yeah.
So, Christina, can you share with the audience what services you offer, where they can find you if they're interested in working with you?
Yeah. So I offer sort of a variety of different things, and it often will change as well depending on what feels in alignment. But the core pieces that I offer, I do readings. One of the readings I do are one-to-one Akashic Records soul readings. Another style of reading I offer is intuitive guidance sessions with spirit, and that's really designed to help someone strengthen their connection with spirit, as well as connect them with their spirit team, which can also include past loved ones. I also offer one-to-one somatic work. So this is designed to help you come home to your body, build self-trust, heal deeper pieces, learn about your nervous system, all of that good stuff. And I also have a 4-month group coaching program. I mentioned it earlier about helping bring you home to your power and your purpose. And that's really for the woman who is just feeling lost and disconnected, but knows that there is this piece within her that's wanting to be discovered, is wanting to find that deeper fulfillment, inner freedom, connection. And then I also offer a couple freebies. So I have a free mini course on how to tap into your power, as well as a free guided meditation for helping you connect within yourself.
Awesome.
So
Great. If you wouldn't mind sending me those links, I would love to add them to my.
yeah, I would love to. Awesome.
Thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure chatting with you and connecting. And I'm grateful for your willingness to share your story. So thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I want to thank Christina again for joining me on the podcast today. Her energy and her message is just so warm and inviting and uplifting. And I hope that you felt that as much as I did. If you're interested in learning more from her, I will provide all of the links to get in touch with her in the show notes. In the meantime, if you're enjoying this podcast and it's made an impact on your life, your mindset, your outlook on career change in any form or fashion, I would greatly appreciate if you left a review on Apple Podcasts. The more reviews we get, the more likely the podcast is to spread to other people who can benefit from it as well. So I'm grateful for your support and for following along each week as we release a new episode. Please join me again next week for another amazing guest. Until then, I'm your host, Brittany Cates, and let's continue shifting your day job.